and welcome to another episode of In a Bite. Now, are you someone that struggles with an autoimmune disease and feels lost as to what to put on your plate? Or are you confused with the advice out there with food and gut health? I mean, one day bread is bad for you and the next day it's the number one health food. Well, today our guest is here to help us understand these topics better and share some practical tools on navigating autoimmune diseases and gut health. She's an accredited nutritionist based out of London, and she's equipped with in-depth experience within the realm of autoimmune diseases. Our guest for today is Farzanah Nasser. We chat about how autoimmune conditions come about, the relationship between nutrition and our autoimmune health, and some really easy and practical food hacks that you can practice in your kitchen today. I hope that you enjoy this episode and learn lots from it. Remember to also subscribe to the show and share this episode with friends and family whom you think can benefit from this. Just hit the share button you see on your screen. So Farzana, thank you for joining us on the show. My first question for you really is how you got into the space of, nutrition, the gut microbiome, and autoimmune diseases.
Hi, no, thank you for having me. Excited to be here. So I originally graduated from finance and I was working in banking. And it was when I was in my mid-20s that I had hormonal imbalance. I had an autoimmune condition. I had psoriasis. I had an ulcer, and I felt like I was on the verge of burnout. I went to see my doctor, and I was given like different medications, and I would open up the pamphlets and I would read the side effects and like what this could be covering. And so I never wanted to take any of the creams or the prescription drugs. So that led me down, trying to understand what was going on. And that's when I went back to school and I retrained in nutrition and then functional medicine so that I could understand what was going on in my own body and be able to, get myself into remission and reverse all of those conditions.
Yeah, and taking a more food first approach, isn't it?
Exactly,
Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
Well, the minute you said finance industry, I just thought stress. I mean, do you think
Yeah.
that stress was one of the, main factors for your conditions?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that is for a lot of the people that I see as well. Stress is always, driving, it's driving a lot of the issues of what's going on. And we know we can't ever get away from stress. We're always going to have some stress, but it's being able to manage it as well as possible and have things in place to support a healthy stress response and, knowing when it's too much and, all of these things as well.
Yeah, for sure. And since we're on this topic, a question did come through Instagram, and someone is asking if autoimmune conditions are due to environmental or genetic factors or others. I mean, we've spoken about stress. What are some of the other factors that come into play?
Yeah, so they call it like the three-legged stool. So there's always going to be a genetic predisposition. There's always going to be an environmental factor as well. And then there's also going to be, your gut microbiome, leaky gut, these things as well. But you need to have the genetic predisposition, and then you will have an environmental trigger. Well, then that, can then trigger it.
So, would you say that some people have the genetic disposition, but if they don't have the environmental factors to trigger it, then it may not come up?
Well, it's usually something that happens that will trigger the autoimmunity, right? So you have the genetic predisposition, and say maybe one day you get very stressed out, that could trigger it. Maybe there's a pathogen that's in your gut that that we know different pathogens can drive autoimmunity as well. Maybe that could trigger it. We know things like blood sugar imbalances, when you're not regulating things like that, that can be a trigger for autoimmunity. We know, there's so many things to look at. It's not just one thing. It's taking a 360-degree view of everything that's going on, because everything could be. So there's so many things to consider when you're thinking about
Yeah,
drivers and root cause with
yeah, for sure.
autoimmunity.
And there's so many autoimmune diseases, right? You've got your Crohn's diseases to psoriasis, you mentioned, to type 1 diabetes. So some of them surely cannot be cured and they are permanent. But are there some that can actually be improved or even cured over time?
You can never cure an autoimmune condition. Like, they
Mm,
can never be cured once you have that, but you can bring it into remission. So with the work that you're doing, you're never able to cure it because you'll always have that predisposition. but you
Yeah.
can bring it into remission, so you can look at the different factors and improve things, so that you're not experiencing symptoms, so that you can see the changes in your bloods. Something like psoriasis, you can see the difference in your skin. So there are different ways to measure it to bring it into remission, but no, you cannot cure an autoimmune condition.
Yeah, yeah, fair enough. So now just moving on to, nutrition and food, what role does that play in managing, autoimmune health conditions?
A huge amount, because when we think of autoimmunity, we know that up to 80% of the immune system is in the gut. And so there's so much that we can do to support our gut health. And so having a look in that and helping to support that will have an impact on our immune health too. We know, for example, that a good immune system is affected by a good microbiome. And when we think about a good and healthy microbiome, we're thinking about a diverse microbiome. So
Hmm.
lots of different kinds of microbes. So diversity supports health. And so we know we can support a healthy and diverse microbiome through our diet. So including a diversity of plant rich foods. So the studies that have been done have shown that you want to include about 30 different plant foods a week to support a healthy and diverse gut microbiome. So 30 can sound a lot to some people, but actually it's not too bad. If you think that it includes fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, herbs, legumes, spices, teas, grains, you've got a lot to choose from. There are a lot of different plant foods that you can choose from to help support your gut and then immune health as well. But it's not just about like food. It's about environment, what we're breathing
Hmm.
in. So another thing that we should be doing as well to support our immune health is just going for walks, getting into the forest, breathing in plant chemicals, because those all help support our gut health, which then has an impact on our immune health as well. But they say that your environment that you're in is what is dictating your gut microbiome. So the food
Yeah.
that you're eating, the activities that you're doing, everything that you're doing is then affecting your gut microbiome. So we do have a lot of power of, in supporting our gut and immune health.
Yeah, for sure. In fact, it was really interesting looking at the gut microbiome of people in different countries eating the same foods because their
Yeah.
environments are just completely different. But going back to that 30 plant food a week, that was a challenge that I embarked on earlier this year. And, I'm someone that, loves my plant foods and I eat tons of it. So I did this challenge while I was traveling and I thought, you know what, I'm not going to get anywhere close to it. But surprisingly, I hit a good 37. And like you mentioned, it's
Amazing.
not, yeah, and it's not that difficult when you start looking at things like herbs and spices. And you mentioned teas as well. That's something I'm going to go into later as well because you do share some hacks on that. But we've spoken about foods that can help, and in terms of foods that worsen, these symptoms, I just wanted to know what the mechanism for that is. I mean, my guess is inflammation, but would you be able to expand on that further?
Yeah, so we know that some foods can definitely be inflammatory for the gut. So processed gums, all these kinds of things can definitely cause inflammation. So that's definitely part of it. But also, like if you're eating the wrong foods, you're also increasing like problematic bacteria that's in the gut. So, for example, sugars, you're you're generally feeding LPS producing bacteria when you have sugars. And those kinds of foods. So LPS bacteria are the ones that can drive inflammation as well. So they have a cell membrane which has something called lipopolysaccharide in it. And so when this gets into the bloodstream, it can go anywhere in the body, and that is a driver of inflammation. So a lot of the foods that we have can cause inflammation in the gut, but they can also feed the problematic microbes. So with our gut, it's all about balance, right? We want to have, a good balance of good microbes, and the food that we eat, and like I said, the environment, all these things feed those good microbes, right? So, anti-inflammatory foods, lots of plant foods, they're all the things that are feeding them. But the other foods, too much processed, too much refined sugar, those are feeding the problematic microbes and then allowing them to increase. And that's what we don't want, in addition
Mhm.
to creating inflammation too.
Yeah. So, I mean, I would summarize it as, just keeping a balance is not about completely removing one type of food, but just,
Yeah.
keeping those ratios healthier.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You never want to demonize, you know, a food group or a food, but it's always about balance, getting in,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter what diet you follow, but it's all, you want to get in those plant foods. So, whether you're vegan or vegetarian or pescatarian or whatever it is, whatever your dietary preferences, it doesn't matter, but you want those plant foods in, and you want them to take up about, 80-90% off your diet to get the positive effects on your gut, your microbiome, and then, other systems of your body too.
Yeah. And Farzana, you mentioned something earlier about these sugars that are that produce LPS. Are you talking about the group sugars in general, or are there specific sugars that you were referring to?
So refined, processed,
Okay.
like biscuits, cakes, all these kinds of things, anything refined. So, like, I'm not talking about sugars from like natural food sources like fruit and stuff like that. I'm talking about it refined, processed. These kinds of things will predominantly feed, you know,
Yeah.
the LPS producing bacteria in our gut.
Gotcha. And then, talking about misconceptions, what are some common ones that you see out there about, people and their diet when they're, facing autoimmune conditions?
Misconceptions. I
Yeah.
think one of the biggest one is food has no impact on
Mm,
how you're going to feel. Food has no impact on your immune system. There's nothing you can really do. Like, you have that genetic predisposition. You've and accepted, but food's not going to play a part when food is huge, right? I mean, we are ultimately made from the food that we eat. Everything that we eat ultimately makes the cells and has created our body from when we were small to where we are now, right? We have like a new body every 7 years. So food does play a huge part in that, and we know foods can be really, really healing as well. So take, for example, stewed apples. So we know taking apples, chopping them up and then stewing them for about 10 minutes releases pectin. And that can be really an anti-inflammatory for the gut. So with different studies that were done with that was showing how it had a calming and anti-inflammatory effect throughout the body. It helped heal leaky gut. It helped increase good microbes, and it helped reduce inflammation, not just in the gut but throughout the body you know so little things that we do and little things that we can incorporate as well can have like a profound effect, like a really
yeah.
positive effect throughout the body.
Do you have this recipe for stewed apples to share?
Yes, absolutely, I would love to share that with you, and I love to
Awesome.
make them with things like turmeric and cinnamon, so that's even more anti-inflammatory and even more supportive as well. But yeah, I will share that with you.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, and I'll add it in our show notes for our listeners. And speaking of these stewed apples, you share so many food hacks on Instagram. I was just looking through them, and we practice some of the same actually. So, for example,
Yeah.
pairing, turmeric and black pepper together to help with the absorption and bioavailability. And I just wanted to chat about a few others. This one really stood out to me. So, you recommend to let garlic sit for a couple of minutes. Could you share more about that?
So when you let garlic sit, its active component allicins allowed to activate. So you don't when you use it in a heated dish, you can lose it. So allowing it to sit allows it to activate, so you can retain more of the beneficial properties of the garlic. I mean, there's so many little things with foods, for example, the way we consume them that can have, you know, um, such a beneficial impact. Like even with green tea, if you add lemon,
Mm.
that can be really beneficial. Lycopene, you want to add a fat, beta carotene, like fat, like all these things, just to improve the bioavailability and the benefits that it has in the body.
Absolutely. I mean, that's one that I also recommend quite a lot when it comes to tomatoes, to get cooked tomatoes. So, like,
Yes.
canned or bottled tomatoes, rather,
Yeah.
because the lycopene is more bioavailable there.
Yeah.
The next one you talk about, and I mentioned this earlier, herbal teas, right? So, you recommend using 2 tea bags for a therapeutic dose. Can you share more about that?
Oh, so with tea, I love having tea because it's just, I mean, over here it's winter right now, so it's a little bit chilly. And so to stay hydrated is really important in the winter months. And with the heating on, we all get dehydrated, but it's very
Mm,
hard to drink just plain water. So I love including teas because it's a really simple way to hydrate during the colder months. Sometimes you want something a little bit more punchy, so it's nice to use tea bags. But like some ingredients, for example, echinacea, elderberry, you're going to get more of the benefits. I mean, they say 3 tea bags, you get a therapeutic dose of
Mm,
the herbs that are in the tea bag. But even 2 is really good, because it's just it has more flavor, but you're getting just more goodness from it as well. And if it's like warmer climate where you are, what you could do is you could make, take a couple of tea bags, let it seep overnight, and then once it's chilled, you could use it like in a smoothie that
yeah.
way, as well. But yeah, no, it's just a lovely way to get a therapeutic, more benefits. So like even things like lemon and ginger, or echinacea and elderberry, and especially the when the ingredients are quite good for your throat, or any symptoms that you're experiencing at the time, that can be really lovely and a really simple way to use food as medicine and support
Yeah.
your health.
Using tea and smoothies, I never thought of that one, but I'm definitely going to try that out. Yeah, and you mentioned being in a warm climate and making iced teas. Look, it's hot as here in Singapore, but I'm still drinking hot tea every day throughout the day. That's
Yeah,
definitely something I took from the UK.
yeah.
Um, so,
Even so I was going to say nettle and green tea are really nice if you like use them in the base of your
uh,
smoothies. So like green tea is quite nice, so you'll get a little bit of caffeine in the morning if you want some. And it's a nice time to include it. And also nettle is really nice, like histamine issues, allergies, depending on the season. So nettle is a really nice one to use, in the mornings.
ah. Look, I just came back from Australia and
Yeah.
there was quite a bout of hay fever there. Would you say that nettle tea would be helpful for that?
Oh no, absolutely. So nettle can help stabilize your mast cells. So it's a really nice one. That's one I love to use in the summertime, or if anyone has any histamine issues. 2 tea bags, just boiled water, cover it, let it steep overnight, and then have it the next day, or use it in smoothies. Also, chamomile is a really nice one for that too. That's a mast cell stabilizer as well.
Mm,
So that's a
okay.
nice one to do too.
Do we know like the dosage for that? Let's say if we're not using tea bags, but sort of like weighing it out ourselves. Is there
If you're
any
not, oh, so
like
like as in a supplemental form?
no, like you're using it as a loose tea?
Tea, you
Yeah.
just use a teaspoon of it.
Okay.
So you just use, it can be supportive, it can just be helpful. I don't think you're going to find everything turning around with a cup, with the chamomile tea, but it's just really it's just really supportive. I mean, things like like if you are reacting with your food, having it half an hour before your food can help some people, because it helps stabilize the mast cells. So if you are reacting to food rather, generally, then having it before a meal, 30 minutes before a meal, can be helpful.
Oh,
Um,
interesting.
Otherwise, just consuming it, sipping it during the day is just
Yeah.
a nice way to use food as medicine.
And I guess the key word here is support. It's not going to completely get rid of, let's say, hay
Yeah.
fever, but it's going to help you feel a little bit better.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
absolutely. And you want to get to the root cause of it as well. So with anything that you're experiencing, right? All these things are there to support you using food as medicine, and to support your system. But you ultimately want to find out, what is driving it, where those imbalances are coming from, what triggered them, and support your
Yeah.
system that way.
And so when you work with your clients, I'm really curious to know how do you go about finding out, the causes of their imbalances?
So when I work with someone, the first thing I will send them is, an in-depth medical history form. So everything that's been going on, from birth, antibiotics, dental health, relationships, what was going on in the first 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, the environment that they're living in, is there mold? Have they had like glandular fever, just looking at all the different aspects of their life that maybe they haven't thought about, and looking at, what could be a driver. Could it be something viral that was in the system all those years ago? Is that stress still there? What environments have they lived in? Dental health, we know, mold, dental, viruses, stress, all these things are drivers. I send them a 3-day food diary so I know what they're eating. That's really important to see. And then just looking at all the different symptoms they're experiencing across different symptoms of their body. So how is their liver? How are their hormones? How is their blood sugar? How is their gut? Like, so many questions that you ask give you a clue as to what could be going on. And like sometimes, like in a consultation, it can be like, well, why are you asking that? Because, but it's amazing. Like just your bowel habits, right? Like
Mm,
your stool tells you so much information, you know, that it's invaluable. So, just getting all these clinical all these little clues in a consultation really helps you understand what's going on, what needs support, and then supporting the gut before, supporting the gut, supporting the liver, supporting food intake, and then you might do testing then to see what's actually going on in these other areas, blood testing to look, liver function, sugars, full blood count, all these things, always doing a stool test to actually see what's going on in the gut. How is the digestion? How is the absorption? What's going on with inflammation? What is going on with the, bacterial balance as well? And that's always like the first step, because then you're setting a foundation, working on the gut. And it has an impact. It has a huge impact on everything. And for everyone, even if say the diagnosis is the same, if they have the same condition, it's always going to be for a different reason. No one has exactly the same, root cause. It's so individualized. It's always trying to find out what's going on with
yeah.
someone. Yeah.
It's such an interconnected web, isn't it? And I'm sure a
Yeah.
lot of the work that you do is just trying to connect dots.
100%. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you mentioned dental health, and that one really got me curious. What's the relationship between dental health and these conditions?
Your mouth is the beginning of the GI tract, right? So whatever happens in the mouth is going to affect the gut. So you're swallowing loads of saliva every day, right? So any imbalances, any inflammation there is going to get into the gut. We have stomach acid in our stomach. So it is supposed to be killing any pathogens, any imbalances of bacteria to prevent it from going to the gut. But we know that as soon as you're stressed out, your stomach acid levels drop considerably, right? So that you can't do those things. But yeah, no, looking at the mouth is huge. So it can be a trigger for autoimmunity as well.
Yeah, that's fascinating, and that also just shows how interdisciplinary, like, or rather how important it is to look at these different aspects of health. We can't just look at one.
Yeah.
And interdisciplinary is or an inter I can't speak now, but an interdisciplinary approach is really important when it comes to finding out these issues.
Yeah.
We also had another. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say also, it's not just, you want to keep your oral cavity clean, but things like root canals, amalgams, they can all be drivers for other issues as well. So, it's not just about looking at your gut health, it's also ensuring that you're taking care of your oral health as well, and making sure there's no pockets of inflammation there that could be driving issues too. And even with autoimmunity, we know the bacteria in the mouth, P. gingivalis, which causes gingivitis, we know there's associations with autoimmunity. So we know there's a link between that bacteria and RA, for example. And it's something that they test for when diagnosing RA, is for a particular bacteria in the mouth that could be driving it. So it is also really important to look at oral health, oral hygiene, support
Yeah.
your oral microbiome as well.
Oh, fascinating. All these connections. Now, another question we got from our Instagram followers, and this one's on eczema. Now, the incidence of eczema in the Asian population is pretty high, apparently twice that of Caucasians. And growing up, I remember so many friends having it in school and even through to adulthood. So, how can food help in this instance? And how much can it help?
With eczema, you're thinking, so there can definitely be a food allergy component. So, gluten, dairy, sugar, those are the three biggest culprits with eczema. So it's always worth seeing, trialing and see how you do without them. But a lot is to do with the gut. So I see like just supporting the gut, supporting digestion, looking at the balance of microbes really helpful. Also, liver health, I find those are the three areas I find supporting with if someone has eczema. Food
Yeah.
sensitivities, the gut and the liver can be really, really helpful. Like I say, it's different for each person. It's not like, you have eczema, eradicate this, do this. There's no protocol, right? But those
Yeah.
are three areas that you definitely want to look at and support if there is eczema.
And so, for our listeners who suffer from eczema, what would you recommend them to do as a first step to find out more information on it?
There's an elimination diet which can be really helpful. So if you Google elimination diet, that's usually the gold standard. With the food sensitivity test, you can get like they're not as accurate. So the best way
Yeah.
to try to do it is a elimination diet, and you will. There's so many available, but they're taking the problematic foods, eradicating them for about a month, and then 3 to 4 weeks, and then you're reintroducing one every 3 to 4 days, and then you're taking a note of any symptoms, how you feel, and then you just keep reintroducing, and that way you're able to find out any trigger foods, and then it's the
Yeah.
gold standard for food sensitivity.
Right. And I received a lot of questions about, gluten when it comes to eczema, Hashimoto's as well. Is it the real culprit that people make it to be? What are your
So
thoughts on that?
yeah, so a lot of people people can be, so with eczema, it's always worth excluding, taking gluten out and seeing how you respond to it. So that's definitely, and that's part of the elimination diet as well. It's one of those things you would take out. With Hashimoto's, there's a lot of studies that show that gluten is definitely an issue, but it's more adding fuel to the fire than actually driving the issue. So what happens is when it creates a picture of something called I can't speak, sorry, molecular mimicry. So this is when gluten looks similar to one of your organs and it causes destruction. So, for example, if you have gluten and it has the amino acid sequence A, B, C, D, you can't break it down. And then the gluten gets into the bloodstream, and your immune system goes to remove it from the bloodstream and creates antibodies against A, B, C, D, which is exactly what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to remove A, B, C, D from your body. The only problem is your thyroid has the same amino acid sequence on it, A, B, C, D. So that's where you can get that crossfire when it now starts to attack the thyroid instead of gluten. And that's called molecular mimicry. So taking gluten out is really, really important to calm things down, but it's not going to resolve the problem. Um, but yeah, so you definitely with Hashimoto's, you do want to take it out, but it's not going to resolve it. And there is some studies, well, with some people for T, so you've got two different kinds of antibodies with Hashimoto's. One is thyroperoxidase and one is thyroglobulin. So they say, some say that taking gluten out can help reduce the TPO antibodies, and it can, but it's only part of the picture, but it's an important
Gotcha.
part of the picture. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, that's fascinating. The next one that I received a lot of questions from, and this is the last one here, it's about psoriasis. And, you're someone who has faced it as well. What is the
Yeah.
link with gut health, with food, etc.? Would you give the same recommendations as earlier, which is to go on an elimination diet?
You can, absolutely. I mean, working on the gut is really important. Supporting the gut is really important. Pulling out any food sensitivities that you might have. So, yeah, an elimination diet can be really helpful. Looking at the gut, working on the gut health can be really helpful. They are studies about viruses, and actually, one virus called cytomegalovirus had their studies that linked that to psoriasis, and that was the case with me as well. I had such high. I worked on the gut, I cleaned up my diet, but my psoriasis wasn't getting any better. And then I found, for me, my viral load was through the roof. And as soon as I started working on that, that's when it just instantly cleared up. So it's the gut. You always have to look at that first, but then it can be other things. So, and viruses are implicated in psoriasis as well.
And what was your journey like in sort of, finding out, for example, your viral load? I mean, what got you even looking at that in the first place?
The psoriasis, like I felt really good. I got everything, I had PCOS. I managed to reverse that. I had, an ulcer, imbalances in the gut. I managed to reverse all of that. But the psoriasis, and it got better. So I did the elimination diet. The psoriasis definitely got better, but it didn't disappear. And so I guess, some people might be happy with that. I was happy with that, but I knew there was still a missing link because it was still there. And so, dig a little deeper to see what else could be going on. And viruses are big players with autoimmunity as well. So the next thing I did was I did a viral panel, and I found like huge levels. And as soon when I addressed that, it improved. It cleared up completely. And
Amazing.
but like we said, like you can't cure an autoimmune condition. So my skin was great. It completely cleared. Then I got COVID, and we know that can, like, shake things up a little bit.
Yeah, throw everything in the
Um,
air.
yeah, exactly. So I had taken it into remission. I got COVID. It emerged again. But then once you know what the driver is, you can, I can
Yeah.
get it back into remission again. But, even if you have a flare the second time, it's not always the initial trigger that will, that you can bring it back into remission. Sometimes it can be something different. Luckily, it was a virus that triggered it again, and then working on that brought it back into remission again. But you can't, like I say, you can't cure it, but you can bring it back into remission so that things are better.
Yeah. Wow. Interesting. Well, thanks so much for shedding light on that. I mean, one of my biggest takeaways from this conversation is the garlic hack. I'm definitely going to let my garlic sit for a bit before I add them to my dishes now.
Yeah,
And just in the interest of time, I have one last question for you, Farzana. This is more of a fun one. Now, what's a dish that you haven't had for a while that you would love to have? Maybe something that reminds you of your childhood, or it's a bit nostalgic.
I love a shepherd's pie. Like, I love a shepherd's pie. And I think I've been craving it just because it's so cold here right now. And it's something that everyone, the whole of my family, will have. And it's also another really good example of how you can use food as medicine, like just little hacks that you can incorporate into your food to make it so much more easy, hacks to make it just so much more nourishing. So I love shiitake mushrooms. So shiitake mushrooms are so great for immune health. My kids generally don't like mushrooms. They find them quite slimy. I don't have, so like they won't eat them. So I like to grind them up. Like I blitz dried shiitake mushrooms or even fresh in a blender so they look like mince. So whether you're using so they look like mince, and add them to the base, and you can't taste them, but they give the dish such a lovely earthy taste, and you get all that immune supporting goodness as well in that. In the mashed potato, I like to do cauliflower in addition to potato. Always leave the skin on. I steam it, and I'll always leave the
Yeah.
skin on. But I do half cauliflower, half potato. I add some garlic into that, and I mash it with bone broth. So you've got so many immune, just little things like that. When you make the shepherd's pie using three kinds of onions in the base, so like a red onion, a yellow onion, a shallot, so you've got three different plant foods supporting your gut immune health. You've got the shiitake mushrooms supporting immune health. You've got all those plant points in the mash.
From everything you've listed out, I've counted 7 plant foods already. So, and I'm sure it doesn't stop there. So there you go. With just one dish, and you have that many plant foods
Yeah,
in there. So this is
lots of
definitely a
hacks.
message. Yeah,
Yeah.
a message to our listeners as well, to just see how many plant foods you can add to a dish. I like to add lentils into my shepherd's pie as well from
Yes.
time to
Yeah.
time. Yeah, just to swap out some of the meat, and
Agree.
just
Yeah.
increase the plant points.
Yeah, or
Yeah.
even just make it a lentil shepherd's pie. It doesn't have to be like a meat one. You can just do like a vegan one like that, which is so
Yeah.
nourishing.
Yeah, and the lentils will be a good source of protein as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Awesome. Well, hopefully you can make some shepherd's pie sometime this week to warm up your tummy.
yeah.
How cold is it there right now?
Ooh, it's cold. I don't know the actual temperature. It's cold, but it's nice. It's like it's very cold, but it's really nice as well. Like it's quite
Okay.
fresh when you go for a walk, but you definitely need like your jacket, your hat, and your scarf. So
Yeah. Well, look,
yeah,
I see some sunlight streaming through your window, so that's a good sign. I
yeah,
mean, what we don't like is just those gloomy and
great,
gray
yeah.
days. Yeah. Farzana, thank you so much for your time. I learned so much from our chat, and I'm sure our followers have done so as well. And I will look out for your recipe on stewed apples.
I will get that too. Thank you for having me, and it's been like fun talking to you. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. That was such a good chat. And like I promised earlier on in the episode, there are lots of easy and practical tips that you can start doing at home for your general health, whether or not you have an autoimmune condition. I hope that this episode has been helpful for those of you seeking answers, and that you feel more empowered in your day-to-day decisions. Don't forget to rate the show so we can keep bringing in content that you all can enjoy. And for more nutrition content, follow me on social media and subscribe to my weekly newsletter. You can find all links to that in the show notes. See you in the next one. For the full transcript of this episode, head over to my website, thecharlottemay.com/podcast.